Welcome to the In Spirit podcast from Amoris Christi. Join us as we explore current events and all manner of fascinating topics and explore their connections to Christian living.
Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the In Spirit podcast, joined by the same crew again, Father Thomas and Chris, myself, Anthony. It's a pleasure to have you guys again. How's life been? How's it been going? I know for myself, we're just coming off a small 3-day break with Columbus Day, and so got some time to rest and energize before I go back to seminary, I guess. But how's it been for you, Father? Good break? Yeah.
Good, yeah. I mean, for me, I just took it like a normal weekend. Wasn't a particularly break, but it was great. Yeah.
And I just work.
Okay.
Just a normal weekend for me.
Yeah.
You had work yesterday?
Yeah, no day off.
Oh, man. All right. Well, talking about no days off and all the stuff that we've been doing here, it's very evident that, or not probably evident to our listeners, but if you look at all of us, I guess we've spent quite a bit of our time in our lives studying. And Father Thomas, you had an engineering degree, a philosophy degree, a theology degree, and now you're still studying with another doctorate in ministry. And then Chris as well, you got your master's in philosophy as well, and so
And master's in theology.
Master's in theology as well. So yeah, that's true. You studied quite a bit.
And Anthony, an actual medical doctor.
Yeah, I myself completed MD and then master's of philosophy, and now working on my master's in divinity. I guess
you put
just
it that way, it sounds kind of depressing. I want to spend my whole life in school.
Studying. Well, that's
a bunch of nerds.
Yeah,
that's all we are.
I guess that's a point I wanted to bring up as well. Well, first of all, did you guys enjoy studying? How was it? I'm not just talking about school. I mean, even school, I guess too. You can ask yourself, what's kind of your approach or mindset towards all this studying that you spend time on?
For me, I was never like a very disciplined studier. Like, I was a good student. I enjoyed academics, but I think that was the problem. Sometimes if you don't have to work really hard for your grades, you end up not really working very hard. At least when I was a kid, when I was in public school, that's what I remember. But I liked school. I liked most topics. Except one. I hated statistics. Statistics drove me insane.
It's too precise for you?
It was like, this is fake math. That was literally what I thought. What about for you, Father?
About statistics?
About school.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not really much of a school person. I don't particularly like school or all the formality of academia very much.
He says on his 4th degree.
No, I do like learning though. And I kind of can't stop learning. But it always seems like it's for some purpose in my mind, at least, So I'm like, oh, I need to know this so that, or whatever.
Yeah.
In some way. And then I'm also not I don't think I'm a very good reader, but it's kind of like something that I just force myself through because I want to learn the thing. You know what I mean? So. And the primary way my mind works is like a computer program because I've been programming since I was 8 years old. So for 30 years I've been programming. So I like creating things. That's the work of a programmer. You're constantly in the work of creating. You're never just learning something that's extremely abstract. So that's kind of me.
That's interesting. Yeah, I definitely connect when you say you're a learner, because even some of my earliest memories are probably carrying books around the house and reading whatever was in them to my mom as she was going about whatever she needed to do around the house. Like, I had a book on space, I had a book on dinosaurs, all the things you'd have as a 5-year-old boy, I guess. Those are some of my earliest memories, I think. But yeah, there's this. I think, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on this either, Anthony, but it seems like there's a distinction between what we might call an academic and maybe a learner or an intellectual, if we want to use that word.
So yeah, Chris, I know, what did you do you think how do you see the difference, or how do you see the difference between being a learner or being academia, where you're just, like Father was saying, you're the formalities of it, or the system of it, system of studying, versus, learning? Or how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, I think in my own limited experience doing higher education, one of the things I've observed is that there's a risk of going into the abstract world and just kind of staying there. There's nothing wrong with abstract thinking. It's just there's this image of the sort of cloistered, removed, navel-gazing, self-aggrandizing sage on a stage, like the academic who is very detached from reality and knows a lot of things, but seems to have a detachment from the real things of life. And I mean, we all studied philosophy, and we know how that's an easy risk in something like philosophy. But that's also so much not what philosophy is supposed to be. Even if you look at the history of philosophy, it's not even how philosophy started in the Western tradition. So like in Western philosophy, we go back to ancient Greece, and before the philosophers in ancient Greece, there were the Milesian philosophers. So Miletus is near modern-day Turkey, and we called them the nature philosophers, so, Thales and Democritus and all these different figures. And you see how even in the origins of philosophy, it began with them looking at the world and observing it and asking, like, how does it work? What makes it tick? And I think it was Heraclitus who's the first philosopher to mention the idea of the logos, which, of course, in theology takes on a whole new dimension. But in the realm of ancient philosophy, logos was this idea of like the ordering principle, the underlying principle of how the world worked. And when you consider it from that angle, when that's your starting point, it's almost like the logical next step from there is, okay, like we're trying to understand how the world around us works and the underlying principles and the ordering logic of reality and the universe and nature. And so if all these things have an order to them, then like we must have an order to ourselves too. There must be something in our humanity that makes us tick, that gives us ordering principle. And from there, that's basically how questions about human nature and ethics and morality really begin in Greek tradition. So, you look at just the origins of philosophy, and which is supposedly this very removed thing, and you see how even there, it started in reality. It started in like what makes us live better, what makes the world around us work. And I think that's true intellectualism.
Yeah.
I think that's true like pursuit of knowledge, like in the most honest, sincere way. Whereas I think with like this academic, I don't want to mischaracterize academics, but like, to be this removed academic, it's almost like it never touches reality in the end.
Yeah, and I think, I've seen that in different aspects, but at the same time, academia, when used in the right ways, like I can see so many advances in medicine that, people who have spent their life purely in academia have like brought so much advances in medicine too. So
Right.
I think that idea of engaging the world and not just knowledge for knowledge's sake,
Right.
but knowledge so that, it is engaged into reality too, right? Is what I'm trying to, getting the sense from you that that's what you kind of see the learner as, the true intellectual, the true academic. That's who they are.
Yeah, and like full disclosure, I'm like, I love learning for learning's sake sometimes too, just as like, we'll call it a hobby. Like I love trivia night. I grew up watching Jeopardy.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys did, but
I did. I love Jeopardy.
Like, there's something fun in that. There's something exciting. Like if you enjoy these kinds of things, there's something exciting about just like getting to learn something new, or you'd hope. I mean, I think that's the goal of like a lot of children's television is to make learning exciting for kids. But, there's something to that. But there's a problem when it loses its end point.
Got it.
And yeah, that's, I think, been my experience of it. I don't know, Father, if you...
I think artificial intelligence, these large language models that we've been seeing, like ChatGPT and such, they have actually given us a new perspective. Because before it was like a cool party trick to be able to catalog massive amounts of information in your brain. Right. And in some ways that kind of ability was a scarce resource, and so it would make you very valuable in whatever field.
Right.
And now it's no longer a scarce resource. It's literally available to almost every person on the planet, you know, highly specialized knowledge. I mean, the latest version of ChatGPT, it scored extremely high on the MCAT. I saw that.
Wow.
It scored extremely high. I can't remember how much, but it was high. And also on what is that called? Mensa. That you know, there's like this famous IQ test
like
or whatever.
the Genius Club, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so you know, I think it's in a way it purifies the intellectual tradition, because you know, like, you have all this capacity for thinking. What do you apply it to? And there's a tendency, I think, among intellectuals or highly intelligent people to get caught up in different kinds of games almost. You know, and academia can be one of those games. It's like playing chess. Or let me put it this way. I know so many young people who are extremely bright who devote all of their intellectual prowess to video games.
Yeah.
And they get so good at it. I mean, literally, they are
You can make a career off of it.
Well, maybe they could. I mean, that's rare, you know, that people can actually successfully make a career off of it. But the thing is, they're at like genius level in terms of the way they're playing this game, their reaction time and quick decision making and strategy and all of that stuff. But then the question is what you raised, which is, how do we ensure that it maintains contact with reality? That's one. And then how do we make sure that it's not just something for vanity, which is a huge weakness of academia. You know, because I mean, most of the academic cultures are filled with this spirit of competition, of wanting to be the person who gets all the fame and all the attention,
publishes the
like
most
that.
papers, gets the best speaking positions, gets tenure.
Exactly. And that's why I think artificial intelligence can be a purifying fire to the
If AI can
world.
write your dissertation, what did you really contribute?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is not so much of a scarce resource anymore. You know, you can take a little bit of humble pie. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I was just going to ask, like, thinking about, you know, we have this desire to learn. How do we kind of avoid that pitfall or fall into that trap of, you know, of vanity while we're learning? Is there anything that you guys have seen or applied to yourself? Obviously, share ChatGPT, but, you know, what can we apply to our own lives?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think that what it reminds me of in my own life experience, like growing up, I, like every kid in school, like, you get labels and names put on you. For me, I was usually like, oh, that's like the nerd or the smart kid or something like that. And like, yeah, I've got my inner healing from that, so we're all good now. But like, I remember as a kid how much that influenced the way I would approach grades and assignments in class, because it was like, this is the measure of who I am. This is, you know, if I can do well in school, then it's me fully being the person I am. And like, I'm putting all my personal value onto that. And as far as like just the human side of things, that's not a good way to live. But also from the other side of things, from looking at learning and what learning is for, you know, ultimately, even if it's something of a good thing, like me trying to be fully myself, it's still for me. Like, it's still just for my own benefit. Even if it's not vanity, it's still me staking my own identity and learning for my sake. Whereas I think that genuine intellectualism, genuine Christian intellectualism, there is this sense, we seem to keep coming back to this point of like service of the other, like, or consideration of the good of others. Like, even if it's something very technical and some sort of applied knowledge, like, I don't know, maybe a coding language. It's like you can be someone like, who's codes your own stuff to optimize your house or something like that, like optimize all the appliances around your house. That's cool. But like, at the end of the day, like, especially if you want to get paid, like, you're going to be doing something with that knowledge to help other people.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that connects with what you were sharing earlier in terms of the origins of at least with Greek philosophy, Western philosophy. Like, you have the pre-Socratic kind of, or even just, I guess, pre-philosophy, right? I mean, I'm not as knowledgeable about it as you are, but you've got these the Greek tragedies where they're wrestling with the idea of some cosmic justice, some kind of cosmic justice.
And they stake it on mythological figures, on
Sure.
gods and cycles of nature beyond their control.
Right, and then you get down to Socrates, where the whole question of philosophy is inseparably related to what is the way that we ought to live.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore Socrates, as the model philosopher, embodies what he teaches in his manner of life, including in his poverty, in the fact that he doesn't sell his intellectual skills in the way that the sophists would,
Right.
And so that, I think, has to be regained, this connection with how is what we are pondering and learning and seeking shaping the way that we live, so that it's part of a genuine pursuit of the good for ourselves and for others and for the world. Maybe the good in the broad sense.
Mm.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting too, just even as a historical footnote, that whole era around Socrates, like, you see this trend even around the world, and it still puzzles historians somewhat because it happened in isolated pockets seemingly around the world, where all around in the span of the same few centuries, you had Socrates over here, Buddha over here, and then there was Zoroaster in Central Asia, and like all these figures were all around the same time, whether they were purely philosophical figures or more religious figures or somewhere in between. They call it the axial age because it was like this time where all around the same time, humanity seemed to reach this collective point where we realized we needed to turn from these sort of hands-off answers about how the world works and what it means to be human, and we need to somehow embody a more conscious awareness of our human nature and the world around us, like, because it's all these very self-reflective things.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
And that, we talk about Christ coming in the fullness of time. Jesus
Yeah.
comes just after that.
That's what I was saying. I was like, preparing the way for
Yeah.
Jesus. That's
Right,
amazing.
right.
Wow.
And when we talk about intellectualism, like, I'm just thinking of Fides et Ratio, which is John Paul II's kind of watershed encyclical. He talks about how reason paves the way for faith and how so much of the intellectual life paves the way for the spiritual life. And, there's the famous fresco of the School of Athens, where if you actually go to the place in Rome, I don't remember, I think it's in the Papal Palace, but you go to the place in Rome where that fresco's hanging, and it's on like it's part of a dome. I don't know how well I'm going to describe this visually, but imagine a dome, and the fresco of School of Athens is on one wall of the dome, and in that fresco, the central figures are Plato and Aristotle, and they're like walking forward. So you imagine Plato and Aristotle walking forward out of the dome, this wall of the dome, and the fresco that hangs directly opposite of it on the opposite side of the dome, so in parallel to it, is called La Disputa, which is the dispute. And it's theologians debating the nature of the Eucharist.
Mm.
And in the center of the fresco is the Eucharist in a monstrance.
Oh, wow.
So you see how it's like Plato and Aristotle are almost walking out of their fresco into the truth of Jesus in the Eucharist. And it's very like intentionally done to show the journey of the intellectual life towards faith.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful. I think it makes, that the idea of that the intellectual life changes the way we live, like you guys were sharing. Also, it changes in a way. It's always at the service of the other. It's not about, in a sense, being measured or trying to. It's not about vanity as well. So, I love that. I guess one thing I did want to ask is that, like, what kind of drives you towards striving for that intellectual life? Like, like I know, because for many of us there's that, okay, I'm like that ability to ask questions, constantly questioning things. So that's one way for me. I kind of think of like, why do I want to learn that? I mean, sometimes there is that question that comes to my door. What is that that's actually happening? Or, what is this in this fresco that's actually happening, like you were sharing?
Yeah.
But what is it for you guys that kind of drives or strives you towards that intellectual life? That true intellectual life we were talking about, of connecting with the world, engaging with the world.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because, again, thinking back to earlier years, one of my nicknames in high school was Chrisopedia, because like my friends were just like, you've just got a fact for everything.
No one likes a know-it-all.
Yeah, I definitely got accused of that too.
We do.
Yeah, just a
We
joke.
do. We like
No,
you, Chris.
Well, they're like, what do you have to prove, man? Like, no, I think really it was a lot of formative experiences over the years that shaped that element of my life. Because yeah, at first I was like, is this okay? People are not liking this part of me. Like, is this a bad thing? Is it bad to be intellectual?
Mm-hmm.
Should I dumb myself down to try and be more relevant? And I was like, no, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't seem to work, especially going through my own faith journey. And, we talk about how, everything that God has created in us is good. What it eventually led me to understand is like, it's all important.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like right now I'm reading through Man's Search for Meaning, which is a classic, Viktor Frankl. And one of my takeaways from reading that is like, you really only have two ways you can live your life. You can live it like nothing matters, or you can live it like everything matters. Like, I don't think ultimately, in the ultimate sense of things, I don't think there's an in-between. Sure, things can matter in different degrees, but I think that my experience of intellectual life is that it all matters.
Yeah.
It's all important somehow. Important for what? Important for other people's good.
Yeah.
But you treat everything with importance. You treat everything with relevance. There's just to bring up another point, there's this great homily from St. John Henry Newman, and he talks about he preached this homily when he was still an Anglican, but it was about the angels, and he said how there's an angel that governs every aspect of nature, like all the processes of nature, all the laws of nature, every like atom, and it's almost like everything in nature has an angel that presides over it, that governs it at God's bidding. And it was like he was talking about it from the perspective of the angels, but that also has like relevance when you think about intellectual life. Like, everything in reality actually is so important that like God's assigned an angel to it.
Yeah.
Like, if you think about it from that level, like, it's all important. It all matters somehow. And I think that for me gives everything a sense of gravity, a sense of purpose, a sense of value. And when I think about it in terms of my own life, I think also a sense of mission. Like, how is what I'm learning going to contribute to what God desires for me at this stage in my life, or at this particular thing?
Oh, wow. I love it. Like, giving a purpose even to that sense of that questions that is in you. I mean, I think that's really powerful for all of us listening, right? Like, every question is not just something that just vanishes in the air. It's created with a purpose, and
Right.
in a way we have a responsibility to engage those questions. Father, any thoughts on what kind of drives you to learn or drives you to?
Well, I was going to say, Chris, I like the way in which you're attaching the intellectual life to reality itself. And that's something that we can take for granted, but it can actually be very easily severed, the connection. From one perspective, it's like the intellectual life is or the intellect is not really, I mean, it's amazing in one way, but it's also kind of not in another way. Because at best, like if you try to understand everything,
Mm-hmm.
all you're doing is taking everything that's in reality that actually is there and then finding a way to represent it in your mind, you know, developing different systems, I guess, of thought or conceptual frameworks for navigating reality in your mind. So it's reality that's amazing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And reality is so amazing, infinitely so, and like infinitesimally so, if you want to put it that way. And it keeps us wanting to learn. But all we're doing in learning is sort of allowing reality to make its impression upon us more deeply. And
I guess there is also, aren't we also in a way looking at reality and also searching for its meaning, purpose, you know, in a way too, by understanding reality? So it's not just about, I'm trying to understand, like, you're not just meaning a pure observation, right?
no, but I mean, when you say you're searching for its meaning, the meaning you're searching for is part of reality.
Yeah, it's
Otherwise, you
present in the
wouldn't be able
reality
to
itself.
find it.
Yeah.
You know?
Right. Well, what I hear is wonder. Like wonder is the word I hear in what you're describing. It's like
Sure. I mean, and it's hard in a technical age because now the focus is not just on understanding, but on our ability to change things.
skill.
We understand this world now. And so, like, I don't know if you saw what SpaceX did a couple of days ago where they
catching the rocket.
Ca-
That was
yeah,
pretty
that's
cool.
crazy.
with chopsticks.
Oh
you
my
know?
goodness.
I mean, phenomenal stuff. So it's like, wow, we can really manipulate nature and reality, and which is something humans have always done, been able to do, obviously. But more and more as we understand. But even then, we have to keep in mind that all we're doing is understanding reality enough to where we can unlock its potentialities more than we ever have before.
I love
So
that.
all of that potential is already there in reality. There's no realistic person who would deny that.
Right.
We're unlocking its potential. So I think for anyone who pursues the intellectual life, it should be in the spirit of wonder, and it's actually intrinsically a humble thing.
Right.
Because you stand before reality, which is you realize that you didn't create it. You
Right.
did not create this marvelous world that you're so interested in that you can't stop learning about. And also, you only know a very, very, very minuscule fragment of reality at any given time. You know, and that's the thing for like people who like learning. It is overwhelming, you know, because you can go down many, 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 many rabbit holes. You know what I mean? Like even when this NASA put up this thing, another what is it? I don't know, some device or whatever to explore Europa. You know, this oceanous moon of Jupiter.
Oh, wow.
And then, you know, you go down that rabbit hole, start looking into this planet that has an entire ocean underneath a layer of ice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I realized as I was doing that, there are people who have devoted their whole life to studying Europa, you know, one of the moons of Jupiter, you know? And it's just like, that's how vast reality is.
I love the fact that how you said that, you know, learning is about understanding reality to unlock its potentiality, you know, and I think that can be just really an anchor for all of us, you know, as we're learning. I guess, do you guys kind of see that, that learning, that curiosity, that wonder is inherent to who we are as human beings, or, you know, I think in a way, 'cause I think people can be afraid of asking these questions, you know, because, you know, I guess, is there a mode to engage these questions too that come up within us, you know? You guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think it is, but it has to be fostered. And it's not necessarily an easy thing to have a culture or social framework that fosters that, right? Because, for example, sometimes we look at people today and we're like, well, people are just sitting there scrolling on their social media, which is very harmful, you know, to teenagers who spend hours on social media. And so it kind of diminishes that sense of wonder and curiosity in them. And that's true. But on the other hand, if you dial back the clock to where definitely for most of history, people had to primarily focus on survival, finding food and shelter and things like that. I mean, that too actually, hinders the free exploration, of intellectual exploration, because you're primarily thinking about your survival, and you're worried, and like fear also greatly hinders it, right? So if you're fearing various threats, elemental threats or threats from different groups of people, and you're not going to be as free, So I mean, it's extremely important. It is something innate to us to wonder. I strongly believe that. And yet at the same time, we have to consciously think about how to foster that and create atmospheres that foster that.
Yeah, it reminds me of a few things. Going off of what you're saying, that element of fear, there's, sorry, all I could think of is that scene from Batman Begins where Falcone tells Bruce Wayne, like, and you fear what you don't understand. You're always going to fear what you don't understand. And then he kicks him out of the shady club. But there's something to that. Like, we have a natural fear of the unknown. And you see how a lot of mythological stories are built around like these terrifying gods who rule the powerful forces of nature. Like, a god of storms, a god that causes earthquakes, and there's volcanoes and fires. The ocean. I mean, ancient Israelites had a terrible fear of the ocean, and the god of chaos in Canaanite religion was the god of the ocean. So like we have this natural tendency to put the unknowns out there into, just try and distance ourselves from it. And even in church history, this is something that we've had to face. Like, some of our failures as a church over the centuries has been when we get too guarded. Like when the church first tried to fight modernism, and it didn't work out because in so few words, let's just leave it at it didn't work out, because basically the church tried to shut the doors and say, like, we're not going to touch it. It's all bad. It's anathema. Leave it alone. And now, I mean, that's an oversimplification, but we'll just say that the 1800s was not a very great century for the church in terms of the intellectual life and engaging the intellectual life. But many great saints in that era of the church too. So, no, not all bad.
Including St. Pius X himself.
St. Pius X. And of course, St. Therese is that century, and Louis de Montfort, I believe, John Vianney. So, like, there are good things to come out of that time. But you see when there's a general attitude of fear and like, we don't want to touch that. We don't want to look at that. We don't want to engage that. And I think that what saves it is, in my experience, is when we make the first priority the person behind that idea. Like, for instance, there's certain philosophies, political systems, religious ideas that are dangerous. But if my first priority is the good of the person behind those things, then even in some certain situations where it's prudent, understanding those things better can help me reach through to the other person.
Or even the good of yourself as well, right? For your own...
Right, my own, needing to protect myself from a dangerous idea requires, at least to some degree, that I understand what I'm coming up
against. Or for
against.
you to flourish to the full potential.
Right, it might not be as dangerous as I thought it was either. That's another possibility too. And then like I do flourish because I understand it better. But I also, of course that requires a lot of prudence and discernment and maturity. Curiosity can also be a bad thing, as well as a good thing. But I just go back to this this quote from Augustine I remember learning, where he says, gold is yours wherever it's to be found. In other words, whatever good you find out there in the world, make use of it. Wherever you find gold, it's yours.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, I think, as you're saying that, it reminds me of the need to actually ask these deep questions is essential, actually, maybe essential to engage the world we are in today. And yeah, I remember when Archbishop Menapurmbal was here as well, he was just sharing the need for depth and to not be afraid to ask these deep questions about life and how that engages the world. And he's a missionary and he's been a missionary for many years in Northeast India, and how these deep questions influenced him too. So just as you were sharing that, it brought me back to that memory.
Yeah, and there's like there's times where you see that we need to correct our course, like we try and dialogue with, I don't know, a different way of thinking or a different idea about anything. Like
Yeah.
it could be medicine, science, philosophy, whatever. And, we have to course correct, take a step back, realize, okay, that didn't work. Let's keep moving in a different direction. That's there. But I think that that's better than like not doing anything. Like, at least in my experience, that seems to be a more courageous approach. And I think you can only do that when you do have a very deep conviction and trust in the Lord, that like there's nothing in the world to fear when he is with you.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I don't know if you had any
Well,
more
I
thoughts.
don't know if you had a chance to speak, Anthony. I mean, any thoughts that you have about, I mean, obviously you're someone who is not just a medical doctor, but you're continuously in the process of reading and learning different subjects. So
Yeah, I guess I've never thought about it until maybe Chris, brought it up about the why are we learning? Why do we need to learn? But yeah, I think it makes sense that, I mean, in a way, I believe that these questions, like we were talking about, are inherent to who we are, and we have a responsibility to kind of address them and see where these questions are leading to, and how, in a way, maybe God is speaking to us through these questions to engage the world more deeply. And I can think of different paths I've gone down through, like with Institute for Excellence or, spirituality and health. These are paths that opened up in me because, in a way, I think I responded to certain questions that came up in my life. So I do agree that, these are very relevant. And I think the profound impact it can have on me, but also on others too, of, engaging these deeper questions too. So yeah, I completely agree with what both of you guys have said. So really profound, actually. Yeah.
We've talked about it in prior episodes too, but even just the deep link between medicine as a field and charity, I kind of am a little jealous of you, Anthony, just because, like, I mean, it's got to be exhausting to go through med studies, but I can't speak to that. But at least there's always that thing in the back of your mind, like, this could save somebody's life. I don't know. Maybe, I don't know if that ever came up or.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it comes up all the time, especially when you're cramming through the books, when you're studying for exams, when you're, just spending hours studying, it's a question like probably every teacher kind of tells you, remember that one day you will just use this knowledge for the good of another person.
Right.
Which is, I mean, it's not necessarily like, oh, this exam question is that particularly we're going to use it, but it is true, definitely. And I think that's one thing that actually drove me to actually study more after my encounter with the Lord, was that, yeah, I mean, whatever I'm experiencing, whatever I'm seeing in the world around me, these are actual people and their lives. And, I have a responsibility to like help them in the best way I could. And if God's given me the intellect, then yeah, I have to use it. So yeah, for sure.
I don't know if you you might have heard this joke before, maybe not, but like the joke is just someone says like, "Is there a doctor on the plane?" Like this man is in trouble. Is there a doctor on the plane? And then like some guy stands up and says, "I'm a doctor." And he says, "Great." And then he goes, "A doctor in philosophy." And then just like the flight attendant's like, "This man is dying." And the guy just says, "Well, we're all dying." Like, aren't we? Like, what is, and then he just launches off into a tirade. But yeah, it's like, yeah, there is, it's a little easy, at least with medicine, to see the relevance of things.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, yeah, there's a beauty to that, in which medicine probably is like a tangible, practical reality. But no, I think like all these questions that we're asking that are inherent to us that we talked about are a way for us for the betterment of ourselves and for the betterment of society too. And so I think that that curiosity, wonder, fostering all that, not being afraid to ask the questions, is a way each of us can engage the world and make a difference in the world. And I truly believe that too. So I hope our listeners, as they're listening, can ask these deep questions and dive deeper into them and foster a culture and foster within themselves this idea of engaging these deeper questions within themselves and with others too. And so there's a lot more I think we could ask about this, but we'll end it here, and maybe we'll pick Chris' brain a little bit more in another episode. But thank you guys for joining, and hope to see you next episode. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the In Spirit podcast. In Spirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.